Hi, Peter Boyles from 710 KNUS, and welcome one more time to The Shoot. And this was named because of professional wrestling, and every once in a while there's a real fight, and the wrestlers call it a shoot. The rest of it is a work. Well, we got a shooter. I've been thinking about how to put this together for Jim, but he was a true shooter. Let me tell you how this comes about. Thousands of years ago, I had a hand in the martial arts. I wasn't any good, but there were great fighters in this country. And one of my dearest friends is Karen Turner. And Karen was one of the best women fighters perhaps in this time period. And we were having a conversation before Thanksgiving, and she said to me, "Do you remember Jim Butin?" I said, "Well, of course." And she said, "He has a book, and I'd like to send it to you." And so she did, and the book is in front of me. And kind enough, in Oklahoma City, a legend, Jim Butin. Hey, man, thanks for doing the shoot. Merry Christmas, and thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I am too. I mean, I remember your name and all those great guys. When you go back and look at those names of Joe Louis and Jeff Smith and Howard Jackson, Bill Wallace, and you're right there. And so begin the beginning. We had a great phone call. You more so than me, were known as the second generation guys. What does that mean, and what did it mean to martial arts?
Well, it was a time period that I was very fortunate to be in. It's referred to as the blood and guts era of tournament karate. And that was the premise for my book, is just remembering all the experiences that I was able to be a part of, and all the icons that I rubbed shoulders with. And as I mentioned, I used to read Black Belt magazine when I was a white belt and a green belt. And I was reading about guys like Joe Louis and Chuck Norris and all the top stars in martial arts, and had no concept that I would be around them or meet them or even make black belt at that time. But I was always reading them and drooling in the magazine about, wow, these guys are so awesome. And then as I continued to stay with it, I was able to eventually get some success in competition as a brown belt. And then as I moved into the black belt arena, I was a small fish in a big pond, but I'd done well in the brown belt competitions. And I still had the desire to be up there. And as I was able to meet some of the top people in the Southwest. As it turns out, one of the hubs for martial arts competition and top people in competition was in Texas, which is where I was, in Fort Worth, is where I was raised. And so once I made my black belt and started competing more and developing some success, next thing I knew, I was shoulder to shoulder with those guys and actually competing and fighting against them right away.
You know, it's interesting, and I've tried to put this together. I called it the second generation. The first of those men had been GIs. They'd been Marines, they'd been in the Air Force, they'd been in the Army, and they were in Korea, they were in Japan, they were in Okinawa, and they began training there, and then they came back to the US. Does that pretty much hold together?
Yes, it does. You know, Chuck Norris attributes a lot of his experiences there. And my instructor, James Pat Burleson, was a Texas icon for developing business, and as a tough, rugged fighter, he was the first national champion, which he won in Washington, D.C. in 1964. And so I had no idea. I didn't seek him out. I was just fortunate enough to be there when he offered a class that I could afford and attended. And so right away, I had top-notch people to work with, and yes, the military was a great opportunity for our GIs to experience stuff in the Asian countries.
And those guys came back from particularly those three places: Okinawa, Korea, and Japan.
That's correct.
And they brought with them something that I suspect 99% of Americans had no idea what this was, and it was called karate. They didn't even pronounce it correctly, and it caught on like wildfire, didn't it?
Yeah, I did. You know, as I mentioned in my book at Karate Stories, I was a 16-year-old kid and saw bullying, which is a national problem now, pretty dominant and prevalent in the school that I was in Fort Worth, Texas. And I wondered what I would do if some of those bullies started messing with me or trying to hurt me in some way. And so karate was always in the back of my mind. I said, well, I don't know if I'll ever have an opportunity to learn something, but I sure would like to. And then when it became available to me, it was like no stopping me. I had to get there. I wanted to do it. And I think that's really a dominant thing for a lot of people around the country here.
I think so as well. And it sometimes historians call something like that a belly fire. You had fire in your stomach. His people believe that politicians have belly fire, but the fighters, and I suspect any and all aspects of life that just triggers it and says, I want to do that. And here you are, you were 16, right? The first time you walked in.
Yes, yeah, I was.
How did they treat you?
Well, there weren't any kids in the martial arts at that time, at least in the schools in the Fort Worth area. It was pretty much all an adult-oriented activity. So I was probably one of the younger members in the class. And the attitude of that time was very very macho. It was I know that Pat Burleson pulled a guy out of the class and put him in line, hit him with a punch in the belly, in the ribs, and it dropped him to the floor, and the guy was gasping for air. And Pat looked at the class, which I was standing in line in, and he said, that was a reverse punch. If you do it right, that's what's going to happen every time. And there wasn't any apology to the guy.
No.
It wasn't, are you all right? It's like, if you don't like it, the door is right over there, and you can hit it, and we don't care.
But don't you think that those original men who brought martial arts to America, that's how they were treated in Korea? That's how they were treated. I know the first man to teach me had trained in Okinawa, was a Marine, Harry Smith. And the way that he treated us was the way that Shimabuko treated him on the island.
I believe that's true. Yeah.
Talk to that, if you would, a little bit.
Well, like I say, the whole attitude in martial arts in Texas area, particularly, which was known for being a rugged, hardcore, competitive state, that was pretty much the attitude. Is that it's going to be strong, it's going to be hard, and if you don't want to come back, like I said, we don't care. We're going to continue without you, and if you want to be here, then you're going to toughen up. You're going to do what we ask you to do, or go away. And that's pretty strong.
Who do you think decided? And I saw that 64, the Junri tournament, and I saw that fight. And who decided to start putting these tournaments together? Because when I first saw martial arts, I just wandered into a tournament because I was trying to box in the Hebrew Y in Pittsburgh, and they had a martial arts, a karate tournament, and I happened to wander in the door. I was actually dating a woman that was friends with a woman that her boyfriend was fighting. And I went, wow, look at this. So it wasn't as advertised, it wasn't ballooned, it was very cloistered, wasn't it? Who was going to get in?
Yeah, there were very small events too. And originally, when in the States here, there were competitions in Japan and Korea and other countries, and a lot of those Asians that came over here, Junri out of Washington, D.C., he experienced competitions over there in Korea. And Takayuki Mikami was a Shotokan stylist in New Orleans. And he was an all-South champion in Japan, and he had events here as well. So the Americans enhanced the rules and changed the structure a little bit, but originally it was like kind of a one-division thing. If you're a white belt or a black belt, you just lined up, and everybody was in the same division. And obviously, the higher the rank, the better the opportunity or chance for them to be successful. But as I entered into it, there were belt divisions, white belt, and at that point it went from white to green and blue was a division, and brown belt, and then black belt. There were no junior divisions or kids divisions originally, and even women's divisions were something that had to be developed over a period of time.
The other thing I've told people, just lined up. It had nothing to do with weights.
No lightweight, heavyweights. Just get out there. If you think you're bad enough, come on.
God, thank you. And I'm a little skinny old guy now. I was a really skinny old kid then, and there'd always be some big guy left, and then me.
Oh yeah.
and they'd ragdoll you, and beat on you. And
That's right. Well, I knew I was 155 pounds when I made black belt and 6'2", and I was really a lightweight
oh,
competitor. But every tournament I went to, they'd say, "Well, we don't have enough heavyweights. Get some of get that tall guy over
yeah.
there." Because I'm 6'2", and they said it doesn't matter what he weighed. They just wanted
Yeah.
somebody else in the heavyweight division. I'm going, hey, these guys are 220 and 240, and they hit
Yeah.
hard. I don't want to be in there with
Oh,
them. So I
and
had
they,
to I had to
yeah.
learn how to hit and get out of the way to be effective.
You have a great moment in the book, and there was this tremendous, monstrous fighter out of Texas by the name of Fred Wren. And I've talked to Karen about him, and I've read about him, and I actually saw him once. And you have what I call a crossroads moment with Fred Wren. Talk about that if you would.
Well, I tell everybody that Fred Wren made a man out of me. I was probably 18 or 19 when I first locked horns with him, and he was about the baddest thing on feet at the
Oh,
time. There was no hand gear or foot gear that we wore in those competitions at that time, and I saw him in a competition in Fort Worth hit a guy with what's called a ridge hand. It's kind of the opposite side of throwing a chop. You tuck your thumb in, you hit with the inside edge of your hand. Anyway, this guy's name was Carlton Morris, and he was a strong 185-pound guy from South Texas. Fred hit this guy when he moved in on him with this ridge hand under his chin and turned him upside down. The first thing he hit the floor, and it was a concrete floor, was the guy's head. And he was unconscious. And then by the time I got over and kind of looked into the ring, he had a baseball swelling on his head. He recovered. And they said, "Are you going to continue?" And he was goofy, and they said, "No, this guy can't continue."
yeah.
And I thought, well, at least Fred's going to get disqualified for excessive contact. Well, the ruling was, since Carlton had moved into Fred's range or his attack position, when Fred hit him, he was justified, and it was Carlton's fault that he didn't block it. And because he was unconscious and couldn't continue, he was disqualified. So I'm looking at that, I'm going, I don't know about this deal. I sure hope I don't have to fight Fred Wren. Well, the next tournament I went to, I did. I was Chuck Norris was a center referee, and at that time period, it only took two strikes to hit an opponent and win the match. And Fred was very effective at grabbing your sleeve or shirt and kicking your feet out from under you, and then punching you in the face and head while you're on the ground. Well, as he reached for me, I hit him with a kick right in this chest and the body area, which was a scoring area. And then he grabbed me and he threw me down and he started punching on me. And it took 3 or 4 guys to pull him off of me. But when they did, and we got back up and I rearranged my uniform, they gave me a point. And I went, oh no, this is not good. So he came in and did the same thing again, and I hit him with another strike the same way. And he threw me down and smacked on me and hit me and knocked me around and got back up. And then Chuck Norris was a little hesitant to give me the point because of Fred's notoriety and the fact that he was such a bad dude. But Fred said that when the judges held up their flags and they indicated that I had scored again, he said, "That's 2 points and the match is over." And so he bowed out to me, and I reached to grab his hand and to shake it, and he just turned and walked away. And I thought, whoa, I don't know. So I went on to the next level, and I think I fought Skipper Mullins that night in the finals. But I was just didn't have another thought about Fred Wren, except I'm glad I survived. And then a friend of mine, Harold Gross, out of Dallas, was in Fred Wren's school or classes. And I was a friend with Harold, and he said, "Are you going to Dallas for the next tournament?" And I said, "Yeah, that's a big deal." And he says, "Don't go. Fred is drawing pictures of on the heavy bag." And he said, "When everybody throw round kicks at him, and he's going to kill you." And I said, "Well, talk to him. It was an accident. I don't know. I didn't want him to be upset and thinking about me day and night." So then we get to Dallas, and there's like 30 black belts in the lightweight division lined up. And Fred went to the front of the line. I'm watching him the whole time. And I go to the back of the line because I didn't want to dance with him at all. And we kept eliminating down. We got down to 4 guys. There was a guy named Douglas Hughes from Lubbock, and Harold Gross, and Fred Wren, and me. And I had drawn Harold Gross first. And Harold says, "You better let me win." because if you don't, they don't disqualify anybody in the finals, and Fred is going to kill you. So I thought about it, and I said, well, Harold's good, and he was good enough to beat me. He wouldn't have made the finals if he wasn't, but I fought him and I beat him. So then it's set for me to fight Fred because he destroyed the other guy too. And but at that point, I'm going, they don't disqualify anybody. It's a bare knuckle thing. I've seen people bleed like crazy, get their noses busted and heads split open. And I'm thinking that this is my future. So I was really paranoid and scared, and I did not really fight him. I probably threw 2 or 3 techniques at him during the course of the match, but I didn't try, and I just survived it. And then after the match, I got second place. With second place in the U.S. Championships in the lightweight division in Dallas, Texas, is a big deal. But I didn't feel very good about it because I did not fight him. I didn't put any effort into it. So I asked myself, what are you going to do next time you fight Fred Wren? Are you going to have your tail between your legs and let him smack you around and do what he wants? Or are you going to fight him? And I made a decision that I would never let that happen again. And that if I did have to fight him, I would give him my all. And I did. I fought him for first place in a tournament in San Antonio that next summer. And I took second place. But I hit Fred with a turning back kick and knocked his air out, which proved to me that he was human. We fought and he won the match. But I had more self-respect for myself then than any other point in my martial arts fighting. And the last time I fought him was in 1970 in Taki Makami's tournament in New Orleans. And I won the match, and I pretty well handled it. I controlled it. So Fred Wren developed my maturation to give me the confidence to fight anybody or to compete against any of the top talent in the world that I might find.
He must have been something. Karen tells a story about another who's no longer with us, who I just loved, a guy named Howard Jackson. And I just thought the world of Howard, got to know him. And apparently Howard once defeated Fred Wren. Fred Wren, after being beaten, took his black belt off, put it on the floor, and walked away. And that's that's a Karen Turner story. And what about the guy that people hear about, Joe Louis, not the black champion, but Joe Louis, the white heavyweight martial arts fighter? Talk about Joe Louis.
Yeah, Joe Louis was definitely a hero of mine. I read about him in the magazines, as I mentioned earlier. And he was out of either North or South Carolina, and then he was all over the place and competed in all the major events in the country, and was probably to spend a lot of time in California as well. But I didn't run across him until probably about 1973 or so. Mike Anderson was the producer of a professional karate magazine, and he had owned the karate schools here in Oklahoma City that I purchased. And I was working for him, and Joe Louis came into town as his guest or involved in a magazine shoot of some kind. And I got to get out there and fight with him, spar with him some. And I was in awe of the guy. I mean, I wasn't worried about being killed like I was with Fred Wren, but I highly respected him, and I got to know him a little bit and understand that the egos in martial arts are for the top people it was very, very strong, very high. And he had a very high opinion of himself. He was pretty arrogant. He would talk to you if he wanted to, that type of thing. And so he did visit with me some and give me some tips on some things that I could do to improve my skills. And then I got to compete against him in Houston, Texas. I fought him for first place in the heavyweight division in the Karate Olympics down there in 74. And I wasn't intimidated, but I was still like, wow, this is the guy that I've been reading about when I was just starting in the martial arts. So there was still a lot of reverence for him and his skills, and wondering what am I going to be able to do against him. And as it was, I lost the match 4-2. But I really made a kind of a rookie mistake. There's 5 judges in the competition, and each one of them has to see a point clearly to call it. And once they do, they raise a flag. Well, there were 3 judges in a position to see Joe Lewis's techniques, and there was only 2 judges in a position to see mine. And I had at that time a screaming front leg round kick that I could hit anybody in the groin with whenever I got within a certain range. And I hit him cleanly. And the 2 judges on my side said, "Oh, yeah, that's in." And they called it. But then he followed up with a ridge hand strike and hit me in the jaw. And the 3 judges on his side saw it. And knowing what I know, the thing to do when you're in that bad position is to circle your opponent and make him change positions with you so that the 2 judges only see his techniques and the 3 judges see yours. Well, I didn't do it, either out of awe of who I was with, or that wow, I did hit him,
Yeah.
it's working. But I stayed in the same position. I hit him again, and then he followed up with another ridge hand strike and hit me again. And that was the balance of me losing the match. So when I was in the dressing room with Joe, I said, "I thought I had you. I thought I had you. I thought I was going to win that match." And he said, "You thought you could beat me?"
Whoa.
And so that arrogance popped through, and it was like he didn't give me any recognition for the fact that I did pop him, but that was Joe Lewis, and like I say, I considered him to be a friend and a mentor, and he was just an awesome guy. But I knew that he and I would never be the best of buddies.
People like that appear, and maybe, you talk about, the greats, and many of them, and regardless of the area, regardless of the field, they had that attitude. You can't beat me. You can't do this. You can't do that. And perhaps it's a helpful force.
And possibly.
And then there were stories when those guys got to California. And who do you subscribe to? Was it Chuck Norris who goes, Bruce Lee? We can talk about Bruce Lee, but who takes it to the movies? Because I remember going to see martial arts movies out of China in some obscure theaters, and I didn't understand the language, but you could watch the fights. Who do you credit with all of that?
Yeah, well, a lot of those guys, and I wished I had been closer to California. I don't know that I would have had a shot of being in any of those films. I know that Chuck Norris invited me one time. I think he was making Missing in Action, was going to be in Mexico. And he invited me to come down and participate in the show. I probably would have been a guy in a Jeep getting blown up and thrown out for the bushes, but I don't think I'd had any kind of significant role, but it would have been fun to do. And I saw the Bruce Lee movies. I never got to meet Bruce Lee, being here in Oklahoma and Texas. I'm far removed from where he was. And he wasn't particularly a competitor. He did a lot of fighting and hardcore training, but he didn't like the idea of point tournament competition. He didn't feel that was realistic enough, and he did not participate. But he did work with a lot of celebrities, and Chuck Norris and Joe Lewis, I know, were constantly working with him too, training with him and learning some of his skills and things. But those 2 guys were most instrumental in the movie industry and making entertainment.
And as the story goes, if it's true, and I've read it numbers of places, then there's a great falling out between Joe Lewis and Bruce Lee, and not with Chuck Norris. And so Chuck Norris really starts up the ladder, and he's now standalone. I mean, he is the man, but there's a lot of stuff, the Hollywood parts of martial arts, and some of the stories weren't really that good. They didn't have good endings.
True. Yeah, there's a lot of stories bannered around about instances. Gene LaBelle was a top martial artist
who I knew real well, by the way.
And he had situations where he was involved with Steven Seagal and some of the other people. There's a lot of stories that go around, and not being there and not seeing it, I don't know. I just listen.
You and I got to know Judo Gene pretty well, and used to have great conversations. And I had a foot in pro wrestling, and it was one of the most fun couple years of my life, doing the ring and doing the post or before promos. and got to know Gene. And Gene was a great storyteller, and there wasn't many guys get past Gene. Gene was as advertised. I don't know if you ever were around him or got to know him, but
I had met him, but he's not a guy that I really knew. It's like there's a lot of California guys. Pat Johnson was another top guy with Chuck Norris, and he was a top competitor and a tough guy. I didn't really get to know him. I did know John Natividad, who ended up residing in Las Vegas, who has passed on. But there's just a lot of top people that came out of that area.
Well, Gene LaBelle allegedly made Steven Seagal go to the bathroom.
I heard that.
and he looked the most unassuming guy. I mean, he was Judo Gene.
Right.
You also knew and Mike Stone, and you had a dinner with Priscilla Presley. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, that was in Colorado. A friend of mine, Jim Harkins, had a school in Boulder, Colorado, and I was my wife was from Denver, and we went up there to visit. And it turned out the tournament was coming up pretty soon, and so we stayed in town, and I trained for it and worked out with in their school, and went there. And as it turned out, Harkins had Mike Stone and Priscilla Presley at his show. And they were there for the tournament. I think I won that tournament. It was the Colorado Open tournament, and I won first place in the competition. And we went to a dinner in Denver, and with Priscilla and Mike Stone, Bob Wall, myself, my wife, and there might have been somebody else, Jim Harkins and his wife, I'm sure. And we just had a little dinner party. And Bob Wall had always been a swell guy to me, but I've heard stories about his arrogance and his evil demeanor.
He was in Enter the Dragon.
Enter the Dragon. He was O'Hara that was had the scar and all that, and fought Bruce, and it was a great show. But we ran out of wine, sangria wine, and Bob was upset because he didn't get the attentive service from the waiters. And he held the cask up and then dropped it to the floor, and it bounced off the floor, and that didn't sit well with the waiters. They came over and tried to figure out what the disturbance was. And so Bob started making noise about not getting service, not getting the wine. And they said, well, we're going to have to ask your party to leave. And the police came, and then Bob Wall ended up showing a badge of being in the LA police affiliate group of some type, and tried to smooth it down. They didn't arrest any of us or take us out of there, but we did have to leave the facility. But Priscilla was there with Mike Stone, and she was very sweet and unassuming, didn't talk very much, and she was just a gorgeous lady to look at.
Elvis Presley got elevated, I think, to an 8th degree black belt through a couple of different people. And anybody that knew anything knew that if Elvis was a 8th degree black belt, we were astronauts. And so how did all that go down with you guys?
Well, I agree. And I dismissed a lot of that just due to the celebrity of Ed Parker having Elvis as his student or training with him or whatever, and whether Elvis requested it or whether Ed Parker just decided to do it, I don't know. I wasn't privy to any of those meetings, but I wasn't too enamored with the fact that, oh yeah, Elvis, he must be something if he got an 8th degree black belt. I'm thinking, well, it was probably just something that happened, not particularly because it was deserved or earned.
Yeah.
And at that time period in martial arts anyway, the 10th degree black belt was kind of designed for the originator or beginner of a system or style of martial arts, and that no one else was going to replace him. You might have a 9th degree or some 8th degrees in the system they were in, but there would be only one top dog, and that it wasn't something that would be expanded on. And now most of the organizations and things around the country are throwing 10th degree black belt designs around like candy. And that maybe just because the guy was pretty hot 30 years ago, but he's been sitting on the couch, eating TV dinners and watching the tube with his remote, I don't know that he qualifies to be a 10th degree, but there are a ton of those guys around.
I agree. I mean, when I was a kid starting out, and like you, I read everything I get my hands on, and I still got my collection of black belt magazines. My mother saved them. And I think no, seriously, I think they put them on eBay, see what somebody does with them. But there would be a handful, and I mean a handful of 10th degree black belts, and in Korea only to 9. They never went to 10. And Shimabuko was on the island, or and these guys, they were be revered. And now in my reading and listening and watching, and almost the whole notion of that kind of belting has been thrown out the window. And it's kind of, I think it's sad. I'm not involved in any of it, but I just think just traditionally it's sad.
Well, it is, and there's, I still believe that there's a way to structure it so that it has meaning, and it's not just a good old boy organization that passing them around. I am now the executive director for the WMARA, which is the World Martial Arts Ranking Association, which was passed on to me by Pat Burleson. He was the originator or founder of that organization to develop a ranking system for black belts to give credibility to those higher ranks. Typically, it's like everybody wants to be the chief, nobody wants to be the Indian, and everybody that has a karate school will have their own belt structure or organization thing to develop their black belts to certain levels and higher Dan rank. And with the WMARA, we have these icons in the martial arts that have agreed to endorse the WMARA with their name that can be placed on the certificates that we issue to show credibility for this organization. You've got the Ed Parker, and you've got the Joe Lewis, and you've got the June Marie, and the Bob Walls, and the Jim Harrison, and the Bill Walace, the top guys that were in it, Steve Armstrong. There's a total of about 12 men that have their names on these certificates. So when we issue them, it means something. You don't get their names on your certificate if you weren't worthy. And so this is something that, in my opinion, ranks the WMARA higher than any other organization that may be out there that is ranking people to higher rank, just because of the endorsement, which means that when we do exams, we do a background check, and we don't hand these out with just like, yeah, you did a lot back in the 70s, so we're going to bypass your exam. No, it's a physical exam for every level, 2nd degree all the way to 10th degree. And there is a fee associated with it, and there is an executive board that's going to approve or deny the opportunity to even take the test. So we're structured so it has merit. It's a merit organization, not just because we like you.
One of the things, and again, just through my eyes, that brings some of this to an end is the arrival of the UFC MMA. Jim, what do you do with watching those fights?
Well, in the 90s, when they kind of developed, I was very interested in looking at it and seeing what was going on. And they had a big mishmash of different styles and levels of people. There were karate guys, judo guys, jiu-jitsu guys, and then obviously the Gracies were the standouts. They were the ones that had the system and really probably had the interest from whatever promoters or developers of the sport saw as using them as the value, as the key group, because they were dominant and nobody could handle them. They were effective against anybody that they came across, and those were the stories that you heard about the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu anyway, even before those events were held. But that was kind of the proving ground to show that they were the real deal, and they were. And of course, as that thing developed, the context of the competition changed. I mean, you had the jiu-jitsu guys who didn't really throw a lot of kicks; they just want to get a hold of you. But there were some good kickers, good kicking skill people that were involved in it. Eventually it became the wrestlers saw this as a great money opportunity for them to be involved in a sport that maybe was gave them more remuneration, and they could get out there and be in front of the public more and get more notoriety. And they could use their wrestling skills, and they learned more jujitsu movement to be able to make that work, but they didn't bring any kicking skill into it. So unfortunately, the leg kicks were about the only things that you saw. And then you had two guys laying on the mat hugging each other until someone got choked out or tapped. And that was kind of boring to me. I thought, well, I don't want to watch that. I want to see some guys standing up. I want to see some of the kicking skill things that I was a part of and had seen and been around for so many years. So I'd really kind of lost interest in even in watching those shows. And I did watch some whenever you had a Brock Lesnar or you had somebody coming into it that looked like, man, what's this guy going to do?
McGregor, McGregor,
into a real deal. But so occasionally I would tune in, but most of the time it was like I didn't care. I just went away.
And because I look at the gates now, and they're PPVs, and the gates are astronomical, and Dana White is a guy with an iron fist, and I think they really controlled it, and controlled it well. What was the most money you ever made by taking first place anywhere?
Well, I fought for the light heavyweight world championship in the PKA in 1975 in the Capitol Center in Washington, D.C. against Jeff Smith. And I got TKO in the 5th round. I did not win the world title, but my payday was $3,000. Plus paying my way to get there, and room and food. That was my payday, and I was happy to get it because there wasn't too many opportunities to make any money at all. I mean, I won some tournaments where I won $500 here or $1,000 there, but there was never any serious cash involved.
Now, when you look up and see the money that Dana White's paying, and it is astronomical money to make those fights. And
it's amazing. It is. But there's a lot of risk. There's a lot of risk in there too. I know that one of the concerns I had with some of the kickboxing matches was some of the kicks were international rules, or rules were allowing kicks to the legs. And I'm thinking, if I get kicked in the knee when I'm standing on it and throwing a motion, it could end my activity totally. And I didn't want to take the chance of possibly being injured for $500, $1,000, or $5,000. So I elected not to fight in any of the events that involve leg kicks.
And that's one of the Gracie's leads. They do that step kick, and they're aiming for your knee.
Yeah,
they're coming at your knee.
You can't stand up. It's hard to do much.
I mean, this has been so wonderful for me. The book really, and I'll hold it up. How do you get a hold of the book? Because if you live, everybody he's talking about, and actually you cover up for some names, and anybody smart knows who they are. So how do people find the book? And we'll do this again, I promise.
Well, I'd love to. It's a fun deal. My website's beyondthefighting.com, and on that website, all 3 of my books are listed, along with I have a new one that I've just done, which is a technique and strategy video USB with the book, as well as kind of a package to kind of show some of the strategies and things I used during that blood and guts era against some of these monsters and some of these top fighters. I also have an aerobic kickboxing video, which was fun when Billy Blanks did that back in the 90s. I had actually done it first, but he was in California and had some great investors to help him along with that project that I didn't have. But it was a fun thing, and we've got that. And then the World Martial Arts Ranking Association.com also has a listing of all of my things that we've got offered, and it leads insight into joining that organization to be ranked.
I'll leave you with this. Who was the best you ever saw? And I can give you weights or heights or whatever you want to do, but at the top, during that time period that will never happen again, because it was full contact, bare knuckles, let them go. Sure. And I caught a little bit of it myself. Who was the best you ever saw?
Well, there was so many guys that varied in one degree or another. Bill Walace, I fought twice for the championship and the U.S. championships, and I expected to beat him each time. And each time I got second place. Yeah. And he was a talent and a skill, and you knew he was going to kick you in the face with that left foot, and you still got hit.
Yep.
So he he was special. He tried to teach seminars to other people to do what he does. There's no one else can do what he does.
Next to Bill, who do you got?
Jeff Smith was a light heavyweight world champion in the PKA and a good friend of mine. I fought Jeff 5 times. I beat him 3 times, and he was always hard, rugged. If you were not ready, he would bowl you over. So he was just awesome. And then my stories with Fred Wren, like I say,
I love those stories.
he's in the mix too. I mean, as far as one of the top guys that I encountered, and especially at the time period that I did. The Joe Lewis's, the John Natividads. There was so many good top people that were out there that I enjoyed being around and had the privilege to get out and dance with.
Bill Walace was there that night in the Nichols Arena. He was doing some play-by-play in color for that first UFC fight when the Gracies came in, and I got to know them and did a lot of radio with them, and then got to know Bill, and actually got in the ring once with Bill, which was a huge mistake. And yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, you never saw it coming. It was like, yeah, he could tell you he was going to do it.
Exactly.
I told people was like, the whole Green Bay Packers back with Lombardi with that sweep. He would tell you, all right, he's coming around, and he'd come around, and you couldn't stop him.
And they were going to do it. That's right.
And I'm going to do it again, and you do it to you again. And Bill Walace could put it on your cheek so quick and tell you he was going to do it, and and he would do it. And I thought, this is senseless. You're a true gift. I saw you, I watched you, read about you in magazines, and I really want to thank Karen Turner for making all of this happen, because she did. And there's a one of a kind. Someday she should be in that seat telling stories as well.
It's true. Yeah, she's got a lot of stories to tell.
And I hear from, every once in a while she drop her guard and tell me stories about, well, you guys went to Europe, and you guys, I mean, this is stuff we haven't talked about.
Yes.
That the European trips, and you went to Korea and fought, and
yes.
Wow. When you brought it home to Korea, how did the Koreans treat you?
Well, the Koreans, they're talk about arrogant people. They at least in the Taekwondo arena, they developed Taekwondo. It's their sport. As an American, you can train from us, you can learn from it, but you'll never be as good as we are. And it was the kind of the attitude that they had. And when we were there, I was on the U.S. team. There was 5 guys on my team on the East Coast team that we competed in the first World Taekwondo Championships in 1973. And it was their rules, their judges, and there was no way to know when during the matches we had to fight 3 2-minute rounds against each of the guys that we competed against. And at the end of my first round, I felt like I was winning. Second round, I felt like I was winning. Third round, I thought I won. And then they held his arm up, and I'm going, "Whoa, wait a minute!" So it was they were pretty racist at the time. I had to be the anchor man, the best guy on the team, because I was white. And actually, Mike Warren from Washington D.C. was one of the most talented black competitors in the country, or white. He was just great. He was awesome. I picked up so many things from him when we were in Korea and competed, that he should have been the anchor man, because he was the top guy, but he wasn't. I was, and I fought their heavyweight guy and so forth and so on. But we lost the first round and fought through the losers bracket and made our way back up to the top position to fight Korea for first place, and we still lost that. I tied my guy in the final match. Mike Warren actually won his match against the Korean, because I think the place would have booed him heavily if they'd given it to him.
Yeah. No, they call it getting hometowned, and it's real.
Yeah, that was my experience.
I get a chance to meet you sometime. I'd love to. The stories are great. The book is worthwhile if you went through that period, and so many of us did, not on the level that this man did, but you know the names. And you watched them, and like you said, Black Belt Magazine was like you read it thin. I mean, you read it and then reread it and read it and then reread it and read it again.
Exactly. Wore it out.
Yeah. Merry Christmas to you and your wife and everybody. And someday we'll shake hands, but I hope this video goes a long way. You're the man. Thank you.
Merry Christmas to you, and thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Take care, sir. Everybody, I'm down the hall on Saturday morning at 9 o'clock, and it was announced yesterday that Henry Kissinger passed away. We will do a show on the life and times of the professor. Take care, everybody. See you next time on The Shoot.